Tonight, we'll take a journey through one of the oldest and most powerful stories ever told, the tale of the Trojan War. This story has been passed down for thousands of years. It is a story of pride, love, fate, and the fall of a mighty city. We'll begin in just a moment, but before we do, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy these retellings, feel free to like or subscribe. It truly helps. Thank you. Now, let's begin tonight's story. The story of the Trojan War begins long before the battles. It begins with a wedding. Far from the fields of Troy on Mount Olympus, the gods had gathered. It was the wedding of Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, a sea goddess. Everyone was invited, all the gods, all the divine guests, except for one. Eris, the goddess of discord, was left out. She was known for causing trouble. So, angry at the slight, she arrived anyway. She didn't bring music or blessings. She brought a single golden apple. And on that apple she wrote 3 words: to the fairest. 3 powerful goddesses claimed it: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; Aphrodite, goddess of love. They argued. Each believed the apple was meant for her. So they turned to Zeus, king of the gods, and asked him to choose. But Zeus refused. Instead, he sent them to a young shepherd, a prince in hiding living on the slopes of Mount Ida near the city of Troy. His name was Paris. Paris was no ordinary shepherd. He was the son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy. But before he was born, his mother dreamed of giving birth to a flaming torch, a sign, the prophet said, that her child would bring ruin to Troy. So when Paris was born, his parents left him in the wilderness, hoping nature would take him. But Paris did not die. He was raised by shepherds, far from the palace, never knowing he was royal. Now, years later, the goddesses came to him, each offering a gift in exchange for the apple. Hera promised him great power to rule all of Asia. Athena promised wisdom and success in battle. Aphrodite promised him love, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. He gave her the apple, and in doing so, he set the world on a path to war. That most beautiful woman in the world? Her name was Helen. She was already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. But soon, Paris would visit her palace, and soon after, she would sail away with him to Troy. Whether she was stolen or she left by choice, no one can say for sure, but the Greeks believed she must be taken back. And so, the kings of Greece prepared for war. Before Helen married Menelaus, she had many suitors. She was so admired that her stepfather, Tyndareus, worried that choosing one man would lead to conflict. So, a clever idea was proposed by Odysseus, king of Ithaca. Each suitor would swear an oath to protect Helen's marriage and to defend her husband if she were ever taken. Now that Helen was gone, that oath was called upon, and all across Greece, kings and warriors prepared their ships. Menelaus turned to his older brother, Agamemnon, the king of powerful Mycenae. Agamemnon agreed to lead the Greek forces. Messengers were sent far and wide. The greatest warriors of the age were summoned. From Ithaca came Odysseus, clever and cautious. He had just become a father and did not wish to leave his home. He even pretended to be mad, sowing salt into his fields, but the trick was uncovered. He kissed his newborn son goodbye and sailed away. From Phthia, in the north, came a young warrior named Achilles. He was strong, fast, and said to be nearly invincible. When Achilles was born, His mother, Thetis, had dipped him in the river Styx. The waters made his body hard as bronze, but where she held him by the heel, that spot remained vulnerable. Thetis knew he was destined to die young, so she hid him on a distant island, dressed as a girl, but he was found. And when told of his fate, that he could live a long, quiet life or die young and famous, Achilles chose glory. With Achilles came his close companion, Patroclus. Together, they joined the growing army. From Salamis came Ajax the Greater, tall and powerful. From Pylos came Nestor, old and wise. From Crete came Idomeneus, and from many other cities came warriors and ships. In total, the Greek army gathered more than 1,000 ships, but the fleet could not sail. The wind would not rise. The seer Calchas said that the goddess Artemis had been offended, and that Agamemnon must offer a great sacrifice to please her. It was a cruel demand. He had to give up his daughter, Iphigenia. The stories differ here. Some say she was tricked, thinking she was going to be married. Others say she went willingly, proud to help her people. In the end, Iphigenia was gone, and the wind returned. The sails were raised, the ships pushed off from shore. The army crossed the sea, heading east, toward the city of Troy. The Greek fleet reached the shores near Troy. The warriors stepped off their ships, one after another, onto the sandy beach. They built their camp near the sea, surrounded by walls and watchtowers. It would become their home for the next 10 years. But at first, they believed the war would be quick. The Greeks sent Odysseus and Menelaus to Troy with an offer: return Helen, avoid war. But King Priam, ruler of Troy, refused. He was torn. He did not start the trouble, but Paris was his son, and Helen was now under his roof. Honor held him back, and so the war began. In the early battles, both sides tested one another. Paris, whose actions had started it all, offered to face Menelaus in single combat. If Paris won, Helen would stay. If Menelaus won, she would return to Greece. The armies paused, watching closely. Paris stepped forward, elegant but unsure. Menelaus, stronger and more seasoned, struck hard. Paris faltered, nearly killed, but was suddenly swept away by the goddess Aphrodite. She returned him to Helen's chambers inside the city. The duel had ended, but not the war. As the fighting grew, so did the legends. The Greeks could not breach the walls of Troy, so they raided the surrounding lands instead, burning villages, cutting supplies. The Trojans, led by noble Hector, held the city. He was a prince, a brother to Paris, and the pride of Troy. Hector was brave, wise, and loved by his people. He fought to protect, not to conquer. Meanwhile, Achilles, the Greeks' greatest warrior, became angry. Agamemnon had claimed a captured woman, Briseis, who had been given to Achilles. Achilles felt insulted, dishonored. In rage, he withdrew from battle. He sat in his tent and refused to fight. Without him, the Greeks began to lose ground. The Trojans pushed forward. One night, Hector returned from battle to his wife, Andromache, and their infant son. She begged him not to return to the field. She had already lost so much. But Hector gently explained. His duty was to fight. He knew the risks, but he could not stay behind. He held his son one last time. Then he placed his helmet on his head and stepped out into the sunlight. Without Achilles, the Greeks began to fall back. The Trojans, led by Hector, pressed harder. They reached the Greek ships. Fires were lit. Victory seemed close. The Greek warriors begged Achilles to return, but he refused. His pride still burned. Watching from the shadows was Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion. He saw the Greeks suffer. He saw the ships burn. And he asked Achilles for a favor. "Let me wear your armor. Patroclus said. "They will think I am you. The Trojans will fall back, and I will protect our people." Achilles agreed, but warned him, "Push them back from the ships, but go no farther. Do not chase them to the gates." Patroclus nodded. He put on Achilles' shining armor. He led the Myrmidons, Achilles' men, into battle. The Trojans saw the figure in gold and fled in fear. The tide turned. But Patroclus forgot the warning. He was brave, but not invincible. He chased the Trojans to the walls of Troy. There, he met Hector. They fought, and Hector struck him down. Patroclus fell, whispering with his last breath, "You will not live long. Achilles will come for you." When word reached Achilles, his heart broke. He cried out in grief. He covered himself in ash. He held Patroclus' body and wept. His anger turned to fury. He would return to battle. But first, he needed armor. His mother Thetis went to the god Hephaestus, who forged new armor for him. A shield shining with the world itself carved into its metal. Achilles put it on, and with the rising sun he marched into battle. The Greeks saw him and found hope. The Trojans saw him and felt fear. Achilles cut through the field like a storm. He found Hector outside the gates. The two faced each other. No one interfered. They circled 3 times. Then Hector stood his ground. They fought, and Achilles, in his rage, struck Hector down. But his grief had made him cruel. He tied Hector's body to his chariot. He dragged it around the city walls. A painful sight for all inside, especially for King Priam and Queen Hecuba. But the gods were watching. They whispered to Achilles. They sent dreams to the old king. One night, King Priam came in secret to the Greek camp. He entered Achilles' tent, knelt before him, and begged, "Give me back my son." Achilles looked at the old man, and something in his heart softened. He remembered his own father. He remembered his pain. He gently returned Hector's body, and for a while, there was peace. Achilles had returned to the war, and his presence shifted everything. The Greeks fought harder. The Trojans grew cautious, but the gods still moved behind the scenes. Some favored Troy, others favored the Greeks, and their quarrels shaped the fate of mortals. After Hector's funeral, the fighting resumed. Achilles burned with grief, but also pride. He continued to strike down Trojan warriors. He seemed unstoppable. But no one, not even Achilles, is beyond fate. In Troy, there lived a prince named Paris, the same man who had once judged the goddesses and taken Helen. He was not known for bravery in battle, but now he had a chance. With help from the god Apollo, Paris aimed his bow. He fired a single arrow. It struck Achilles in the heel, the one place he was vulnerable. Achilles fell. The greatest warrior of the Greeks was gone. His body was carried back to camp. The Greeks mourned him. Even his enemies felt the weight of his loss. His armor, once made by the gods, was now passed on. 2 warriors wanted it. Ajax, strong and loyal, and Odysseus, clever and quick. A contest was held. Odysseus was chosen. Ajax, feeling humiliated, fell into despair. And soon, he too was gone. The war dragged on. Without Achilles, without Hector, the field felt empty. But the Greeks remembered a prophecy. Troy could not fall unless the bow of Heracles was used. So they sought out Philoctetes, an archer who had once been abandoned on an island. he still carried that bow. Odysseus convinced him to return. With that weapon, they killed Paris. Inside Troy, King Priam and Queen Hecuba mourned another son. Their city still stood, but only just. The Greeks needed a final plan. Something bold, something clever. It was Odysseus's idea. He proposed building a giant wooden horse, tall, hollow, and wheeled. Inside, he and a group of Greek warriors would hide. The rest of the Greek army, he said, would burn their tents and sail away, making it look like they had given up. The horse would be left behind as a gift, a tribute to the gods. And so it was built. Huge, beautiful, suspicious. The Greeks set it at the gates of Troy and left, or so it seemed. The Trojans came out of the city, amazed. Some were excited, some were cautious. One priest, Laocoon, warned them, "Beware of Greeks, even bearing gifts," he said. To prove his point, he threw a spear into the horse's side. It echoed strangely hollow. But just then, a strange thing happened. From the sea, 2 great serpents rose. They attacked Laocoon and his sons. The Trojans watched in horror as they were pulled under. They took it as a sign from the gods. Meanwhile, a Greek named Sinon had stayed behind, pretending to be a deserter. He told the Trojans the horse was sacred, an offering to Athena, and if they brought it into the city, it would bring them favor. The Trojans believed him. They opened the gates. They pulled the horse inside. That night, they celebrated. They sang. They drank. They felt safe. And while the city slept, a small trapdoor opened from the belly of the horse. Odysseus and his men climbed out. They slipped down ropes and ran to the gates. They signaled the waiting ships, which had only hidden behind a nearby island. The Greek army returned, silently, swiftly. They entered the gates. They lit fires. They opened the doors to the rest of the army. And Troy burned. The city was taken in the night. Fires climbed into the sky. Palaces crumbled. Temples fell. King Priam was killed in his own home. Queen Hecuba was taken away in chains. The princes were gone. And the people of Troy, proud and brave, were scattered. Only a few would escape. One of them was Aeneas, who carried his father on his back and held his young son's hand. He would become the subject of another long story, the tale of the founding of Rome. But for Troy, this was the end. For many of the Greek warriors, the journey home would become its own trial. Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek forces, returned to Mycenae in glory. But at home, betrayal waited. His wife, Clytemnestra, had not forgiven him for the sacrifice of their daughter, and Agamemnon never ruled again. Menelaus, husband of Helen, did bring her home. Their return was long and stormy, filled with whispers and doubt. But they lived out their years in quiet Sparta, watched by the gods and remembered by the poets. Odysseus, the clever one, faced the longest journey. It would take him 10 more years to return to Ithaca. He would face Cyclops, witches, and tempests. But that is a tale for another night. Among the Trojans, one man escaped. Aeneas, carrying his father on his back and holding his son's hand, fled the burning city. Guided by dreams and fate, he sailed west. The Romans would later tell his story and say that from his bloodline, their empire began. The women of Troy, taken as captives, whispered prayers to their lost gods. Hecuba, once queen, became a shadow. Cassandra, cursed to speak truths no one believed, was dragged away in silence. Their sorrow echoed down the centuries. And the city itself? Troy became dust, buried under sand, under time, but never forgotten. For as long as people have told stories, they have returned to that place, to the walls, the war, the love, and the fall. And that, dear listener, is where our journey rests tonight. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, I'd be so grateful if you gave this video a like, and maybe even subscribed for more peaceful tales like this one.